Hey there, it's M Price again, hero of M Price Can Read, and this video is for all the M Priceiacs out there. We got Dog Price over here, slightly out of frame. He wasn't framed to start. The Dog Price being Dog Price, he didn't want to participate. Regardless, we're just gonna have a little rant, relaxing rant, as a matter of fact, about some films today. And before we get into it, today is actually the last day to enter my Goodreads competition to receive a free copy of those quaint early writings by yours truly, M. Price. Those quaint early writings. It's a collection of quaint and early writings by me that directly inspired the Please Feel Bad saga, or at least led to the Please Feel Bad saga. So if you're interested in that, take a look. It is indeed free. And if you are one of the unlucky non-recipients who do not win the competition, you can still buy it on Amazon for $2.99, cheaper than a black coffee or any other colored coffee you may prefer. Anyway, let's get down into the film world, the movie madness, and we'll start with the film Chan is Missing by Wayne Wang. Chan is Missing is a sort of neo-noir thriller that's also a sort of exploration of Chinese American identity. It follows two Chinese Americans basically looking for, you guessed it, looking for Chan because Chan is missing. And Chan owes them some money, and they desperately need that money. As they're on their search for Chan, they run into many people who knew him. They interview these people. They ask questions about, where's Chan? Where's our money? We got to get this stuff. And they kind of go on a sort of quixotic adventure, trying to find and learn as much about Chan as they can. And every time they talk to one of these former associates of Chan, um, everyone has a vastly different portrayal of him, a different interpretation of him, whether he was like a cool guy, a funny guy, a mean guy, a nice guy, someone who was smart, someone who was dumb, someone who was rich, someone who was poor. Every portrayal of him just seems to contradict the other. And as the two heroes of our story get deeper and deeper into the mystery, it's almost as if they get further and further from any sort of solution, and they sort of start to bicker amongst themselves and sort of have this conflict between themselves about their own identities and what it means to be Chinese American. And in this country, in America, it does take place in San Francisco, if I remember correctly, which has a huge Chinese American population. Wayne Wang, this filmmaker, made a lot of films about the Chinese American experience and the sort of dissonance that they navigate as a Chinese American, whether they, much like Chan's, enigmatic presence as a Chinese American, they struggle with their identity, whether they are smart or dumb, whether they are rich or poor, whether people perceive them one way or the other, or whether they have to adopt this sort of multifaceted existence in order to survive. And I'm particularly interested in this film and in this filmmaker. I saw this film, randomly, streaming, and I was just totally blown away by it. Had no expectations, and I just thought it was a complete masterwork. I might be a little biased because um, I actually studied Chinese way back in the day, college. 我不知道我是学生, um, 你好, Kailan, and I've just been fascinated by the culture and fascinated by these sort of uh, my Chinese professor explained to me how Chinese people have these sort of personas that they put up in order to survive. One of the shining examples of that is like perceived Chinese food. For instance, people think that, oh yeah, in China they eat roasted dog and spiders and all this crazy stuff. And he would explain to us that that was all basically a facade in order to appeal to tourists, to conjure this image that Chinese people were just totally bizarre and had these crazy food. That way they could sell it to tourists and to people who didn't know any better. and to sort of create this enigma around themselves, where in all actuality, the majority of Chinese people just ate rice every day. And if you had meat once a month, you were like well off. If you just had like some chicken once a month, it's like, oh, you can afford chicken, just crazy. And there's this idea in China too that you would explain where Chinese humor wasn't necessarily about like making fun of someone or making um, in the direct sense of, oh, you're stupid, you're lame, ha 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 ha, where like you would say that someone like Don Rickles, the roast master Don Rickles, doesn't translate to Chinese very well because Chinese people would never directly insult someone to make fun of them or to be humorous because that's so disrespectful to them. So they would not view Don Rickles as funny at all. Whereas like in America, we love Don Rickles and his legacy continues so much through modern comedy. Um, but in China, humor is a sort of furtive, secret humor in the sense that you convince someone of something, whether it's this crazy stereotype or this crazy idea or this crazy interpretation that you yourself are trying to project out. And the humor in it is the sort of chuckling you do to yourself behind their back. The idea of like, you convince people that you eat dogs and that they, buy the dogs and they go, oh my, the dog meat or whatever, the fake whatever, and they'll eat it and they go, oh my God, this is crazy, whatever, and they'll, walk away like horrified, and then the salesman would kind of like, silly tourist, silly American, what have you, um, and that there was a sort of glee in sort of pretending to other people and having in this sort of performance art in real life, and that also in China not everything needed to be explained and not everything needed to have a concrete answer, and that part of their culture was that non-answers in a sense were the answers, and that there was a sort of mystique about these non-answers that caused you to think, and that it was the provocation of this new thinking that um, or this like this instigation into thought that was part of that was sort of part of their existence, part of what made them them, and a part of their daily life, to have that greater profundity in life and to actively think and actively look more into things and not just, to not just make things so easy and straightforward. And part of why that circles back to Chan is missing is at the end of the film, um, the the money that they were looking for is returned to them, not by Chan but by his daughter. And they're like, well, what the heck? Where's Chan? I don't know. How'd the money get here? I don't know. You know, and that it's a sort of like, you know, the the adventure wasn't the climax; it was the friends we made along the way, kind of thing. Of like it, the story was in the journey, and the story was in the mystery, even if the mystery never had a conclusion. And like at the end of the film, he gets a picture of Chan, and his face is all blurred and obscured, and the guys go, I can see. I have a picture of Chan in front of me, but I still can't see his face. In the way that like throughout this entire adventure, and even though they essentially get their problem solved, they get the money, they still didn't really have an answer, still didn't really have a solution to the puzzle. And that's just what made it so special. Anyway, Chan is missing. Wayne Wang. Check it out. Continuing in our international cinema adventure, the last two films by Andrei Tarkovsky, the greatest cinematic artist of all time, Nostalgia and The Sacrifice. Shout out my favorite conspiracy theory that Andrei Tarkovsky was assassinated by the Russian government. He fled Russia, or was kind of kicked out of Russia, made this in Sweden. No, made this in Italy. He made this in Sweden. He was kind of making his journey throughout Europe. But these two films, when we're talking about Tarkovsky, he's the greatest of all time. His other movies are considered like, he has several of the greatest movies of all time, several genre classics that his later works, these two films were kind of looked over and are kind of hidden gems because when you're talking about him, it's just so hard to, when 4 year movies are 20 out of 10s, you know, the other films you make, even if they're 19 out of 10s, they almost get overlooked. And these two films oftentimes get overlooked when it comes to Tarkovsky's oeuvre of work. I look for the chance to say oeuvre whenever I can, by the way. Um, but nostalgia, how do I describe this one? There's so many parallels between all Tarkovsky's films and echoes of all his work. And in this one, it's very much about thinking of one's life and navigating the choices one makes and the sort of ghosts of not only your history, your personal history, but your country's history and your nation's history and how all these other people affect you. And what's powerful about this movie is the sort of his endearing faith through all of this, through all of his tribulations to keep on and keep enduring. And there's this fantastic scene where this guy is trying to take like a lighted candle across this this swath of ground, and the candle keeps getting blown out, and he keeps trying over and over again, and he keeps enduring, and people watch and they wait, and it's just long drawn out. You know, Tarkovsky is a master of slow cinema, and it's just so haunting, and so it's hard to describe because his his work is so, probably for lack of a better term, boring to a lot of people, kind of dull, kind of slow, but it's packed with so much beauty and so much meaning and so much humanity. And you can tell that he was painting with his own emotions while creating these films, and painting with just the absolute most delicate hand to try to create something that would speak to so many people. And what's interesting about all his films is that there is a deep faithfulness in all of his films, and it's very much, um, you know, it's very much expressed in nostalgia. But then by the time you get to The Sacrifice, his last film, at this point he was very sick. He kind of knew this would be his last movie. His body was collapsing, and this film was about. It's one of the most honestly upsetting films I've ever seen. It's about um, this patriarch of this family celebrating his great birthday. And, it's his family all out together in the country, and all of a sudden, these alarms go off, and the TV is lit up, and World War III has broken out, and bombs are being dropped all over the world, and nations are being wiped out, and it's the end of the world, and they're all just kind of like, what do we do? And this guy gets it in his head that if he makes this sacrifice, then the world will be at peace, and the war will stop, and everything will be okay again. And it's about kind of how he goes mad, and he does all this insane stuff for what he believes is a solution to this crisis. And it's just like the workings of an artist at the end of their line, at the end of the rope, and what they can come up with, and what they deem as important, and what they deem, worthy of their lens. And it's one of those things where, like, I'm probably just talking out of my ass right now, and I'm probably just making no sense, and you're going like, I'm Price, what are these movies about? And that's the point, because they're movies that demand conversation, they demand discussion. They're movies that you watch and you just sit and you stoop in, you know, in what they mean and what they ask of you, as a viewer, as a thinker, and the consequences of, like, what are your sacrifices? What is your madness? What have you been driven to? You know, and maybe it's just that, particularly in this film, The Sacrifice, His act, his sacrifice to save everyone and everything, whatnot, is an act of self destruction. And that's just been a topic that I've been interested in personally my whole life. The idea of destroying yourself and why we destroy ourselves, and this almost fatal attraction to the idea of self destruction um, really resonates with me. It's something that I always, that I explore in my own work, of course. And the idea of this guy having this sort of last hurrah of self destruction in what he perceives as an act of sacrifice and benevolence and of saving the world um, is something that makes me think. And of course, the final moments of the film is hard to describe right now, just in like a person to person. It's hard to describe in a way that like makes sense without watching the movie or without like having all these thoughts go through your head as you're watching it. Like it's one of those things that if I just say it, I just say, oh yeah, this guy looks at a tree and he thinks about some stuff. It's just kind of dumb. Like, what are you talking about? Um, but just watch the film yourself and let me know what you think yourself, because it's just one of the most quietly powerful moments that I've witnessed in a movie, and such a such a tremendous end to this man's career and this man's life. Anyway, the next film, the only movie I've ever bought twice, The House That Jack Built. You'll notice a lot of these movies, actually, all of them are they're already in their wrap. I haven't actually opened them yet. I just ordered them recently because I wanted, I'm one of those people who wants to preserve and collect physical media. Um, and I had purchased this movie, the only movie I've ever purchased digitally, um, because when it was first released, it was banned in America because Lars von Trier, the filmmaker, is a little pesky. He's a little scamp, and he showed it. He showed like a unrated or like probably an NC-17 version without like the proper ratings, like the when you watch a movie, it'll say rated, R for this or that. He like kind of defied them, so they banned the movie for like a year in America, and you could get around it for some reason by purchasing through Amazon, because Amazon was like a international waters Amazon or whatever the hell. I don't know. You don't ask me. But I watched it on Amazon, and then when it finally was like, okay, America, you can have it now, I was like, okay, gotta snatch it up. Um, but this is Lars von Trier's most recent movie. I thought it'd be his last movie, but apparently he's coming up with another one. I look forward to. He's my favorite, so I just you can tell. Him, but this film um, is about a serial killer, Jack, who views his killings as performance art, and it's very much like you can kind of tell that he's making an analogy to his own career, which usually I don't like. This kind of intense self-insert. But Lars von Trier is the exception to any rule because he just says it in such a fun way, especially the ending and what he says about like, because if Jack is Lars von Trier, what happens to him in the end is just very much fitting for how Lars von Trier has been treated by the film world and his own journey through the film world. Um, it's just funny because like when he talked about this film initially, he said it was a celebration of violence, a celebration of insanity, and a celebration of the Homo Trumpus, which for those less politically minded, this was made like right when Trump became president, and there's kind of a tongue in cheek uh, MAGA scene in this, not making any political statement from me personally. I don't care how insane you are, your insane beliefs. I'm sure people think I have insane beliefs. Well, probably do, but I most certainly do. And it's interesting in that he wasn't necessarily about politicizing anything either. He was just celebrating the extremism of humanity in general and the extremism that all walks of life go through, especially Jack here. And incredible writing, incredible acting on Jack Dylan's part and all the other supporting actors. Um, What's funny is when it went from like the unrated like NC-17 version to the the acceptable version, they only cut out like a minute and a half of film, and it was just one scene where they he mutilates this person in kind of a if I say in kind of a humorous way, I'm going to get my ass kicked, so I'm not going to say that. But what happens after that is pretty humorous with the police officer. Um, but it's kind of like, oh, it's cynical as shit. it, is, it is rough. It's a film that tries to say a lot about humanity and how there's a simultaneous glorification of violence, but also a simultaneous downplaying of violence, especially nowadays, and how there's just so much numbness to violence. And it's it's amazing in its portrayal of violence in the way that, and I'm not someone who is like I'm down with violence in movies as long as it says something. If it's just pointless violence, like in a Quentin Tarantino, like garbage. I'm Quentin Tarantino's number one hater, by the way. Like I'm sure if you've watched my Criterion Rant video, cannot stand Quentin Tarantino. So bad, such a child. Um, if it's just pointless violence or pointless misogyny, yeah, I know Dog Price, he does suck. Pointless violence, pointless misogyny, pointless just like essentially like torture porn. Not quite that level. All his best buddies are. That's another rant. Um, Dog Price, I know. I don't like him either. If you start barking, I swear to God, I'll have to stop this video. Um, but he's just awful. But with this film, and with other films that talk about violence in a way that at least constructive and at least like provocative and makes you think, and it's not just like pointless blood and gore and guts. Um, then it's fantastic. And in this one, it kind of talks about how like we dog price really. This is supposed to be a relaxing video. Sorry, I get upset when I talk about Quentin Tarantino too. Dog price. Are we okay now? Are we okay? No, dog price. Yeah. Okay, I think he's good. M Price. I don't edit anything out. Anyway, we're gonna pretend that he's not. That he's. How do I guide my hand so it looks like there's a blockage? So that what was I talking about? Damn it, dog price. Um. What was I talking about? I don't know. Anyway, watch this film. It's about. I got it. It's about how like there's some forms of violence we accept, some we don't. The sort of like the humor around violence and the portrayal of like how anything can be funny and any joke. It's about the construction of the joke. It's about the construction of whatever you're making, and how um, if things are properly organized, if things are properly, written and thought out, you can make anything humorous, uh, or anything provocative, or anything, you know, kind of anything, classy, for lack of a better word. Um, as long as you put enough thought and effort, and like there's a kind of tongue-in-cheek motive behind all of it, and there's enough effort put into it where, yeah, you're calmed down now. You can kind of see them in the. I don't know. Maybe you can't. I got bad eyesight. I never know what gets cut out of these. Um, I've been interrupted so many times on dog prices acting, I don't even know what I'm doing anymore. Regardless, the house that Jack built, check it out. I probably have trash taste, but you already knew that if you've followed me this long. And the last film I like to talk about is genuinely one of my favorite movies of all time. A movie that anytime I watch it, I just have to watch it like back to back, like twice in a weekend, just because it is so infectiously rewatchable. And I'm going to get in trouble for saying that. Dog Price. Really, I'm trying to work. Dog Price. You're done. Good puppy. Uh, is the film Climax by Gaspar Noé. Climax is an interesting movie in that there's basically no plot, basically nothing happens, and it's just like a movie of watching a bunch of vignettes all clash with each other. A short description of the movie, and really the only description of the movie, is a bunch of dancers. Dog Price. What do you want? What a pup. He's getting all hot and bothered like I am about these films. Um, it's a film about all these uh, clashing vignettes. A film about all these. Um, my concentration. Jeez. That's why this is a ramble video, because nothing really matters in a ramble video. Kind of like nothing matters in the Gaspar Noé verse. Um, but it's an hour and a half ish film about all these dancers, and they're dancing, they're having fun, having a rehearsal. After rehearsal, there's like a little snack break, drink break, and everyone's drinking punch, everyone's drinking snacks, and then they realize, oh my god, the punch that everyone's been drinking has been spiked with LSD. And at that point, everyone descends into a dance crazed madness and starts hallucinating, going nuts, and it essentially becomes like a nightmare world where they're all just losing their minds. And the first like half hour, 45 minutes of the movie is them just like talking, hanging out, eating snacks, drinking punch, having a good old time. And a lot of it is just people, it's just characterization of all these different people. And the way it was made too was like there wasn't really much of a script. It was kind of just like, yeah, everybody, just kind of hang out, just kind of talk. And we're just going to walk around with this camera and kind of film you and watch you. And we're going to see what happens. And there is so much establishment of the characters, of the figures here, of everyone's kind of relationships between themselves and the others. And, two characters will talk over here, then they'll split up and talk to other people, and they'll split up. And it's just like half the film is just kind of set up. And then at that point, like the opening credits roll. Like the opening credits happen like halfway through the film, because that's when like the real film starts. That's when like the drugs start kicking in, and then there's like a slow descent into just utter untamed madness. And why the film is just so endlessly rewatchable, and why it's so just stunning, and just, I'm just floored every time I watch it, and just so intrigued every time I watch it, is because of the setup of all these vignettes and all these different interactions with, like, as you can see, like 20 some people, who are in this little dance studio. Because as they're all going crazy, all the vignettes sort of clash and collide into each other, and all these different little mini storylines and mini personalities and um, mini relationships collide and tumble and jump and swerve. And once again, it was kind of just like, all right, everybody, um, just act as your character and just do stuff, and we'll be there. And the the camera work is just pretty much Gaspar Noé just swinging around the camera like a lunatic, as he always does. And you see everyone sort of unravel, and you see um, the inner psyches that were kind of below the surface as they were kind of talking and interacting the first half of the movie now get released and loosed upon the other psyches that have been loosed. And it's just like this personality brawl between 20 people. And as it goes, and as the people start, losing their minds, the lights start going out of control, the music starts going out of control, the camera work gets increasingly disoriented, and it's like this complete detachment from reality and detachment from organization. And it is just such a trip to watch, because it's like you yourself are watching this thing descend in real time, and you're just kind of along for the ride. And there people die, people get ridiculously hurt, people like their emotions explode and overflow. And it's just such like, it's like watching a burning car crash, and you just can't watch, but you can't look away. And the more you watch, the more explosions happen, and the more the witnesses run up and they get hurt, and emergency responders show up and they get hurt, and it's just like this is, this cataclysmic vision unfolding before you. And it's something he's never realized in any of his other work and something he hasn't realized since, just because this one is just so uniquely constructed. And for that, um, it's just one of my favorites. Um, and I think you should watch it too. Um, I don't know. I'm big into music and color and sound, and just the visual and audio design of this film is also just off the walls. Um, I think if I remember correctly, like he's had like he has the same crew he always works with, and the composer waited like like a couple of decades for the soundtrack because he kind of just had been playing with it for a long time, and he's like, okay, this is the movie. I can finally unleash it, and it's like, yeah, you're right. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed my whimsical movie rant. You watch all those movies and tell me what you think. Watch all those movies and unsubscribe from my channel because you think I'm a lunatic. Unsubscribe from my channel because Dog Price kept interrupting me, or because you're a Quentin Tarantino fan and I'm his number one hater. Do whatever you want, because you're also a vignette and you're just colliding with me, I'm sure. Anyway, that's been my rant. This has been on Price. As you may or may not know, I can indeed read, I can indeed watch movies. I can do a lot of stuff, and a lot of that stuff is viewed on this channel. And one of the things you can view is those quaint early writings. Competition's still open today. 640 people have applied. You can be 641. You can get my book for free, or you can just buy for $2.99 Amazon.com. Real cheap, real fun, real exciting. I hope you do something. I hope I do something. And Price can read. Dog See Never Sleeps. I hope you sleep or something, or you watch these movies. It's up to you.